everyone, this is Helloangel.design. Today we are making this beautiful dress step-by-step tutorial. It has invisible zipper at the center back. I will show you how to adjust your basic pattern paper, the measurement that you're going to cut for your ruffle sleeve, and the measurement that you're going to cut for your skirt. You can use invisible zipper, you can use any zipper of your choice. It's a step-by-step tutorial. Please share our video with your friends and loved ones. Thumbs up on our video so that YouTube can push us out to the algorithm. Comment down below if you have any question. I will definitely respond to you. I am very sorry that I have not been uploading video for quite some time because my Juki sewing machine, the foot pedal, went bad. I will share with you the details what happened about that sewing machine, which I just bought about 2 years ago. If you guys remember, if you watch my video, if you follow me, I make a tutorial about when I bought that sewing machine, how excited I was. I will share with you all the details. So let's get started and make this beautiful dress for our kids and loved ones. First thing that we have to do, we are going to place our pattern paper on a different paper and trace it all out. You can decide to keep this paper or you can decide to keep the one that you trace out, because both are the same right now. My pattern paper already includes seam allowance. So if your pattern paper there is no seam allowance, make sure you add seam allowance all around your pattern paper, or when you are cutting your fabric, you add seam allowance. So what I'm going to do, I will remove my pin. This is the front, this is the back, and I will just go ahead and write 4 to 5 years front pattern. Make sure you should always remember to do that. I have write out the age of the pattern 4 to 5 years back, 4 to 5 years front. For the center back is 1.5 centimeter for the center back, either zipper or buttonhole. So this is it. I'm going to keep this pattern paper and I'm going to be making use of this pattern paper. The first thing that you have to do, you take your front pattern paper. So you place your ruler or your measuring tape. This is 5 inch. From the waistline down to the armhole is 5 inch. Or if you're using centimeter, you can measure 12.7 centimeter. And you also go ahead and place it at the center front. So this will be the center front. You also measure down 5 inches right here, so that here and here are the same. So what we are going to do, we place our measuring tape at the waistline. You measure 3 inch. If you're using centimeter, measure 7.6 centimeter. And then you come down here, you repeat the same process. Place your measuring tape, measure 3 inch or 7.6 centimeter. This is it. So what you are going to do, you take your ruler, you connect them together. Once you connect them together, what you're going to do, take your scissors and cut it out. So you have adjust the front, and you also take the back pattern, you repeat the same process. So what you are going to do, you place your measuring tape right here, you're measuring down 3 inch. From the waistline down, you measure down 3 inch. If you're using centimeter, measure 7.6 centimeter. And then you come down here, you repeat the same process. 3 inch or 7.6 centimeter. Once you have done that, take your ruler and connect it down. Once you have connected it together, take your scissors and cut it out. So I have cut it out. This is my back pattern and this is my front pattern, and I will put this aside. So what I'm going to do, I will place my measuring tape, or you can also place your ruler from the armhole. This will be the armhole and this is the side seam of the sleeve. I'm going to take a measurement of 2 inch or 5 centimeter. It's right here. And I will also come down to this other side. I'm going to take a measurement of 2 inch or 5 centimeter is right here. So what I'm going to do, I will take my ruler and then connect the both mark together. Once you have connected the both mark together, what you are going to do, you take your scissors, you cut it out. I have cut out the sleeve. This is how it is, the front pattern, the back pattern. So let's place our pattern paper on our fabric and cut it out. So I am using this fabric. It's a beautiful fabric. So I will place my pattern paper on my fabric and cut it out. I have placed my both front and back pattern paper on my fabric and I've pinned them together. I add 0.5 inch or 1.3 centimeter. I also do the same thing for the back. For the sleeve, I also add 0.5 inch or 1.3 centimeter. I'm not going to add any more seam allowance at the sleeve head because I've already done that. I'm not going to add any more seam allowance from the neckline, shoulder, armhole, and sizing because my pattern paper already includes seam allowance. It is only when we adjust the pattern that is when there is no seam allowance. So go ahead and take your scissors and cut it out. And I will show you how to cut your skirt, and we are going to also attach your ruffles on the sleeve, and I will show you the measurement that you need to take. If you're cutting your front and back fabric, remember to also cut your lining. If you don't want to attach lining, you can use your bias binding to bind the neckline and the armhole. But if you want to attach lining, make sure to cut out your lining. I am going to be using the same fabric to lining my top dress. The next thing that I'm going to do, I am going to cut out my skirt. I have folded my fabric into two. I use a pin to secure this. So what you are going to do, this is my front top dress. You place your measuring tape at the waistline like this. The measurement that you get, times that by 2. Once you times that by 2, any measurement that you get, that will be the width of your skirt. If you want more volume, you can add more seam allowance to that or more inches. Remember when we were making the pattern paper, we cut this out from the top dress. Make sure to also add that to the skirt length. If you want your child skirt length to be at the knee level, or you want your child skirt length to be above the knee level or before the knee level, make sure you decide the length that you want. But for me, the measurement that I have right here, that is the length, I'm going to add it to my skirt. So I have already taken my skirt waist measurement. So I am going to place my measuring tape like this, and I'm going to measure the weight. And I've also taken my child skirt length, and the measurement that I'm going to get, I am going to take that as well. So go ahead and measure that, and you can then connect the skirt together. So I am taking the length of the skirt right now. The length that I have is 17.5. So I'm going to add 5 inches to that. That will be 18 inches. If you're using centimeter, place your measuring tape. You are going to be taking 45.7 centimeter by length. Once I take that measurement, I will take my ruler and connect them together. The next thing that I'm going to do, I am going to cut out the back skirt. So what I'm going to do, I will just use the front skirt to cut out the back skirt. So this is the front skirt, is unfold. I will just go ahead and pin them together, both the back and the front skirt together like this. So what I'm going to do, once I am done with that, I will take my scissors and cut it out. Remember, when you are cutting your back skirt, you are going to be cutting 2 pieces. So I will just go ahead and take my scissors and start cutting them out. The next thing that I'm going to do, I am going to cut the ruffle fabric that I'm going to attach on my sleeve. To get that, you take your sleeve. This is my basic sleeve. Place your measuring tape like this. Take the measurement, any measurement that you get, times that by 2. So mine is 20 inches. So I will place my measuring tape like this. So I'm going to be taking the width. Place my measuring tape. I will measure down 25.5 centimeter or 20 inch. You can see that my measuring tape is at 10 inch or 25.5 centimeter because the fabric is on fold. So once you open the fabric, you will have your full measurement. So I have measured that, and I will take my ruler and I will connect the mark together. Once you connect the mark together, the next thing that you have to do, you are going to take the length of the fabric. Place my measuring tape. This is my marker because I'm going to cut this out. These raw edges, I'm cutting them out. I will place my measuring tape. I'll measure 5.5 inch or 14 centimeter is right here. You go ahead and measure it all the way down, 5.5 inch or 14 centimeter. Once you have done that, then take your ruler and connect the mark together. First thing that you have to do, you open your top dress. This is the front of my top dress. You will take the back, you put the both shoulder seam together, make sure that both front fabric are facing each other. You take it to your sewing machine, you stitch it with your seam allowance. My seam allowance is 1 centimeter. And you will also take your lining. So I'm using the same fabric to lining this top dress. Put the both shoulder seam together. Make sure that both front fabric are facing each other. Go ahead and stitch the shoulder seam. Once you have done that, you take your skirt. So this is my front skirt, which I'm going to open the front of my skirt right now. And I will take the back. I'm going to put the both side seam together. Put the both side seam together like this. Take it to your sewing machine, stitch the side seam of your skirt, and you come down to this side, put the side seam together, take it to your sewing machine, stitch the side seam of your skirt. Once you have done stitching, take it to your overlocker, overlock the raw edges, or use zigzag to overlock the raw edges. Once you have done that, you set your sewing machine to the longest stitch. You stitch a gather stitch thread at the top edge of your skirt. I have stitched the shoulder seam of my top dress, and I've also stitched my lining, the shoulder seam. The next thing that I'm going to do, I am putting the both front fabric together. What you are going to do, you are going to pin around the neckline. Before you start pinning around the neckline, from the center back, make sure to measure your zipper seam allowance. My zipper seam allowance is 1.5 centimeter. For the armhole, we are not going to pin the armhole because we are attaching a sleeve. I have pinned the neckline together. The next thing that I'm going to do, I will take it to my sewing machine and stitch it with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Depends on the seam allowance that you add on your fabric. You go ahead and stitch the neckline together. Once you have done stitching the neckline, you take your scissors, snip around the neckline, then push the seam towards the lining and top stitch. This will be the ruffles that we are going to gather on our sleeve. Set your sewing machine to the longest stitch. Stitch a gather stitch thread at the top edge of the fabric. You repeat the same process with the second fabric. Stitch a gather stitch thread at the top edge of the fabric. I have stitched the neckline together, and I push the seam towards the lining, and I understitch the neckline. I hope you guys can see that. The next thing that we have to do, we are going to stitch the side seam of the top dress together. What you are going to do, you pick the back, you pick the front, put them together, you put in the side seam of your top dress together. You pin them together, you take it to your sewing machine, stitch it with your seam allowance, put them together like this. That is the side seam. Stitch it with your seam allowance. and then you turn it like this again, and you pick the other side, put them together, top stitch with your side seam allowance. My seam allowance is 1 centimeter, and you will also go ahead and repeat the same process on this side. Stitch it with your seam allowance. Once you have done stitch it, take it to an ironing board and press the seam apart. The next thing that we have to do, we are going to stitch our gathered ruffle fabric at the sleeve. So what you're going to do, you put them together like this. So we are going to give it a cut. So this will be our middle part of the sleeve. This is the front of my ruffle fabric. So what I'm going to do, I will just put the front together like this. So you're putting the both front fabric of the ruffle together, and you also take your scissors and give it a cut. Once you have done that, the next thing that you have to do, you put them together like this. So both notches are together, and you secure that with a pin, and then you come down to the end of the sleeve. This is my ruffle fabric, the end of the ruffle fabric. Put them together and secure that with a pin, and you come down to this other side. You repeat the same process. So what you are going to do, you're going to gather this side of the fabric on this side of the sleeve. You gather this side of the fabric on this side of the sleeve. I have gathered my ruffle fabric at the sleeve. This is how it is. The next thing that you have to do, take it to your sewing machine and top stitch with your seam allowance. My seam allowance is ½ an inch or 1.3 centimeter. So you go ahead and top stitch. Once you have done stitching, take it to your overlocker, overlock the raw edges. You can also use zigzag to overlock the raw edges. Before you overlock the raw edges, remember to remove your gather stitch thread. I have stitched the both sides seam together. This is how it is, and I use that opportunity to just put the lining and the made fabric together. I top stitch around the armhole. I did the same thing on this side just to secure the lining and the made fabric together. And I've also stitched my sleeve. I use that opportunity to put the both sides seam together and top stitch, overlock it with my overlocker sewing machine. If you don't have overlocker, you can always use your zigzag stitches to stitch that together. The next thing that we have to do, we are going to gather our skirt on the top dress. This is the back of my skirt. So what I'm going to do, this is the side seam, and I will pick the made fabric. Make sure to separate your lining, and I'm going to join the both side seam together. Make sure that the seam are matched and secure that with a pin. And I will come down to the other side. I will repeat the same process. Make sure to always separate your lining, put the both side seam together, and secure that with a pin. So what you are going to do, you are going to gather your skirt at the top dress. Go ahead and gather it all around and pin the skirt on the top dress. I have gathered my skirt at the top dress. This is how it looks right now. The next thing that I'm going to do, I will take it to my sewing machine and top stitch with ½ an inch or 1.3 centimeter. Once I am done with that, I will remove the gather stitch thread, take it to my overlocker, overlock the raw edges, and I will also overlock the center back raw edges. I have stitched my skirt at the waistline. This is how it looks, and I take it to my overlocker, overlock the center back, and I've also overlocked the waistline. The next thing that we have to do, we are going to stitch our zipper at the center back. Before you stitch your zipper at the center back, make sure to measure your seam allowance inside. My seam allowance is 1.5 centimeter. Depends on the seam allowance that you add at the center back. Make sure you measure it inside. And you will also take the length where you want your zipper to end. Mine is 26 centimeter or 10.5 inch. So what you are going to do, you open your zipper. I'm using white zipper because this fabric has white inside, so it will match very well. You open your zipper, you turn your zipper like this, and then you open your top dress. You place your zipper at the neckline like this, you go ahead and pin it all the way down. I have shown many times how you can pin your zipper at the center back and how you can thread your needle to use hand stitch to stitch it first before taking it to your sewing machine. I have used hand stitch to stitch my zipper together. This is how it is. I will take it to my sewing machine and top stitch it all around. Once I am done stitching, what I'm going to do, this is my lining, fold it on top of it like this and fold your seam allowance upward. You fold it upward like this, and then you just go ahead and stitch the lining to cover the raw edges of the zipper. Once you have done that, use the opportunity to finish stitching the center back together. I have stitched the zipper at the center back. This is how it looks, and I've also used my lining to cover the raw edges. This is how it is right now. I have already started pinning my sleeve around the armhole. The way to do that, you just open your top dress like this. So this is the armhole. This is my sleeve. You can see that I stitch a gather stitch thread at the top edge of my sleeve. When you make your sleeve, sometimes we need ease for the sleeve head, and at the end of the day, sometimes the ease is a little bit excess. The way to do that, you just stitch a gather stitch thread at the top edge. When you pull it, nobody will even notice that you gathered that place. It's just a tiny pulling so that it fits the sleeve head perfectly. Just take your sleeve, you turn it inside out. This will be the front of my sleeve, and you push it inside the armhole. This is the side seam of my sleeve, the side seam of my top dress. Make sure that they are matched, and you secure that with a pin. And then this is the sleeve head. I give it a cut right here, and I will pin it at the shoulder seam. So what I'm going to do, I will just place 2 or 3 pins before I will start to pull it just a tiny bit. I have pinned it together. What I'm going to do, I will take it to my sewing machine and stitch it with 1 centimeter seam allowance, and I will also repeat the same process on this side. Stitch it with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once I am done with that, I will take it to my overlocker, overlock the raw edges, or use zigzag to overlock the raw edges. Once you have done with that, you use the opportunity to hem your sleeve. So I fold inside 1 centimeter, and then you fold it again 1 centimeter and top stitch it all around. And then you will also hem the inside the dress. So you fold inside 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeter and top stitch it all around. Once I am done with that, I will show you the final look of this beautiful dress making. This is the final look of my dressmaking. Beautiful dress to make, step-by-step tutorial. Remember to watch the video until the end so that you don't miss anything out. That is very, very important. Please subscribe if you haven't. Comment down below if you have any question. Thumbs up on our video so that YouTube can push us out to the algorithm. This dress is for 4 to 5 years old child, and you all should have a wonderful day. Bye for now.